Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People's Story. 5 years ago, I purchased this beautiful 6-acre property specifically because of the lake that covers nearly half of it. Growing up, my grandfather had a small cabin on a lake similar to this one, and those summers spent fishing, swimming, and just enjoying the serenity of nature were the highlight of my childhood. When I saw this property listed, it felt like fate. The lake was pristine, home to bass, catfish, and bluegill that my grandfather had taught me to catch and release. The surrounding trees created a natural privacy barrier on 3 sides, and the water reflected the changing colors of the seasons in a way that brought tears to my eyes. The property wasn't cheap, but I'd spent years saving and investing wisely. The crystal-clear deed stating my ownership of the entire parcel, including the lake, was worth every penny. I'd finally found my forever home, a place to create new memories and honor old ones. When I bought the place, there was a housing development just beginning construction on the land adjacent to mine. The real estate agent mentioned that an HOA would be established, but assured me my property wasn't included in their jurisdiction. That was fine by me. I wanted nothing to do with rules about lawn height and approved mailbox colors. For the first 2 years, everything was perfect. I invested heavily in the lake's ecosystem, hiring experts to ensure the water quality remained excellent, stocking it with fish, and maintaining the natural shoreline vegetation that prevented erosion. I built a modest dock and bought a small rowboat that reminded me of the one my grandfather used. This lake wasn't just a body of water to me, it was a living connection to my past, and the peaceful future I'd worked so hard to secure. I'd occasionally allow a few neighbors to fish from my shore when they asked politely. One older gentleman reminded me of my grandfather, and I enjoyed hearing his fishing stories. A family with 2 well-behaved kids would sometimes come over on Saturday mornings, and the children's excitement at catching their first fish brought back wonderful memories. I was selective but fair. I simply wanted to know who was on my property and ensure they respected the rules I'd established to protect the lake and its inhabitants. Everything changed when the new HOA board was elected. It started small. I noticed unfamiliar people walking along my shoreline one weekend. When I approached them, they seemed surprised to see me. "Oh, are you fishing here too?" a woman asked, as if I was just another visitor. "Actually, this is my private property," I explained, trying to keep my tone friendly. "The lake and the surrounding land belong to me." The woman looked confused. "But the community newsletter said this is a neighborhood amenity we can all use now." I felt my blood pressure rising but maintained my composure. I politely explained that there must have been a misunderstanding and asked them to leave, which they did without much fuss. Later that week, I walked down to check my property line and found a family setting up a picnic on my shoreline. Their children were splashing in the water unsupervised, throwing rocks at the waterfowl I'd been carefully protecting. "Excuse me," I said, approaching them. "I'm sorry, but this is private property. The lake belongs to me, and I don't allow unsupervised swimming." The father stood up, clearly annoyed. "Look, the HOA said this lake is for everyone in the community now. Water belongs to everyone, right? You can't own a lake." "Actually, I can and I do," I replied, feeling my patience wearing thin. "It's completely within my property lines and I have the deeds to prove it." "Well, that's not what the HOA says," he shot back, making no move to leave. I took out my phone and prepared to call the non-emergency police line for a trespassing complaint. Only then did the family grudgingly pack up, leaving behind wrappers and empty soda cans that I had to clean up myself. That evening, I checked the HOA website out of curiosity. There it was, plain as day. A beautiful photo of my lake listed under community amenities with a description encouraging residents to enjoy fishing, picnicking, and recreation at our neighborhood lake. My blood boiled. I immediately sent an email to the HOA board demanding they remove my property from their materials. The response I received was both dismissive and infuriating. "We understand your concerns, but previous owners have always allowed reasonable community access to the lake. We're simply formalizing this arrangement for our residents' benefit. We expect this cooperation to continue." Previous owners? The property had been owned by the same elderly couple for 40 years before me, and they'd lived as recluses according to my real estate agent. This was complete fiction. I decided to attend the next HOA meeting despite not being a member. I brought my property deeds, survey maps, and documentation of my investments in the lake's maintenance. The meeting was held in a community center that had recently been built in the development. About 30 residents were present, along with the 7-member HOA board seated at a table at the front. I signed up to speak during the public comment portion and waited my turn. When called, I approached the microphone and calmly explained the situation. Good evening. I'm the owner of the property adjacent to your development, which includes the lake that has incorrectly been listed as a community amenity. I've brought documentation proving my ownership and would like to request that you remove any mention of my lake from your materials and inform residents that it is private property. The HOA president, a man in his 50s with an expensive watch and a condescending smile, leaned forward. We appreciate you coming tonight, but there have been verbal agreements with previous owners about lake access that we're simply honoring. I shook my head. I purchased this property with clear title and no easements or agreements regarding public access. If such agreements existed, they would have been recorded with the deed. A woman on the board, wearing a tennis outfit despite the evening hour, chimed in. Well, our residents have been using that lake for months now without issue. In fact, if they continue to use it regularly, we might eventually be able to claim adverse possession. Murmurs spread through the crowd. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were openly discussing trying to steal my property. The HOA president gave me what I assume he thought was a fatherly look. Listen, we're all neighbors here. Being difficult about this could make things uncomfortable for you. Why not just be a team player? Allow reasonable access during daylight hours, and we'll make sure people respect basic rules. Because it's my private property, I stated firmly. I've invested thousands in maintaining that lake's ecosystem. Unrestricted access would damage it, not to mention the liability issues if someone were injured. We could discuss a contribution to maintenance, another board member suggested, as if offering me a generous compromise. I'm not interested in any arrangement, I replied. Please remove my property from your materials and inform your residents to stop trespassing. As I turned to leave, I heard the president mutter, "We'll see about that." The next day, I contacted a property attorney who specialized in boundary disputes. After reviewing my documents, she confirmed what I already knew. The lake was 100% on my land, and the HOA had absolutely no right to it. This is actually pretty clear-cut, she explained. They have no legal standing whatsoever. Their adverse possession comment is absurd. That would take years of continuous use, and you've been actively telling people to leave, documenting the trespassing. Armed with this confirmation, I sent a formal cease and desist letter to the HOA board. Their response was to send out a community-wide email doubling down on their position, claiming I was being unneighborly and encouraging residents to continue enjoying our community lake while we resolve this minor disagreement. The trespassing escalated dramatically. I put up no trespassing signs along my property line, only to find them torn down the next day. I installed trail cameras that captured images of the HOA president himself removing my signs. People began leaving trash on my shoreline, and one morning I discovered my rowboat had been untied and was drifting in the middle of the lake. The final straw came on a Saturday afternoon when I returned from grocery shopping to find a full-blown community BBQ happening on my property. At least 40 people were there, with grills set up on my shoreline, music blaring, and kids jumping off my dock into the water without supervision. I immediately called the police. When they arrived, the HOA president intercepted them, speaking rapidly and gesturing toward the development. To my horror, the officers came to me and explained that it was a civil matter they couldn't get involved in without clear property line markers. The smug look on the HOA president's face told me everything. He'd somehow convinced them this was just a neighborhood dispute. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on my porch looking at the lake, now littered with debris from the party, and made my decision. This wasn't just about property rights anymore. It was about protecting something precious to me. The next morning, I called a surveying company and scheduled the earliest appointment possible. Then I contacted 3 different fencing companies for quotes on installing a high-quality, secure fence around my entire property, including appropriate measures to fence the waterline areas. The survey was completed 2 days later, and to my surprise, it showed that my property actually extended about 15 feet further into what the development had been treating as their common area. I now had official markers at all the boundary points. Next came the permits. I spent a week navigating county regulations, meeting with officials, and filing all the proper documentation. I wanted everything done by the book, leaving no room for the HOA to challenge me on technicalities. All this time, the trespassing continued. I documented every incident with photos and videos, keeping a detailed log. I found fishing lines tangled in my boat propeller. Someone had carved initials into my dock, and I received anonymous notes in my mailbox saying things like, "Lakes are for sharing," and "Don't make enemies of everyone around you." When all my permits were approved, I scheduled the fence installation for a weekend when the HOA president and several board members would be away at a regional HOA conference, information I gleaned from their public newsletter. The fence company arrived at dawn on Friday. I'd chosen a 6-foot ornamental aluminum fence, expensive but attractive and extremely durable. For the sections that extended into the water, they used a special design that would prevent people from swimming under while not harming the wildlife. I had the main gate installed at my driveway with a state-of-the-art security system, keypad entry, and cameras. The entire project cost me nearly my entire savings, but as I watched the fence taking shape around my property, I knew it was worth every penny. By Sunday evening, my property was completely enclosed. The fence followed the exact survey lines, including the additional 15 feet the survey had identified as mine. I added private property and no trespassing signs every 50 feet, all property registered and legally binding. Monday morning, I awoke to a commotion outside. Looking through my security cameras, I saw a group of about 15 residents, led by the tennis outfit woman from the board, standing at my gate. I made myself a cup of coffee before walking down to meet them. "What is the meaning of this?" Tennis outfit demanded as I approached the gate from inside. "You've cut off access to the community lake." "There is no community lake," I replied calmly. "This is my private lake on my private property, as I've been telling you for months. The fence follows the legally surveyed property line." "This is outrageous," someone in the crowd shouted. "My kids were planning to swim there this summer. You can't just fence off a natural resource," another added. "Actually, I can and I have," I replied. "All permits are properly filed and approved by the county. This fence is completely legal." Tennis outfit stepped closer to the gate. "The HOA will be taking legal action immediately. This fence violates our community standards." "Your community standards don't apply to my property," I explained. "I'm not a member of your HOA, never have been." "We'll see what the county has to say about this fence extending into the water," a man in a golf shirt threatened. "Feel free to inquire," I said, handing him a folder through the gate. "Here are copies of all the permits, specifically approving the water boundary sections. The county environmental officer personally signed off on the design." The group grew louder, with several people making threats about lawsuits and property values. I simply waited until they quieted down. "I've documented months of trespassing, vandalism, and harassment," I said, holding up my phone showing the footage of their president removing my signs. "My attorney has advised me that I have grounds for multiple legal actions against both individual residents and the HOA as an organization. However, I'd prefer to simply have my property rights respected from this point forward." 2 days later, I received a formal letter from an attorney representing the HOA claiming my fence violated obscure covenants and demanding I remove it immediately. My attorney responded with our complete documentation package, including the survey, permits, and evidence of ongoing harassment, along with a countersuit for defamation, harassment, and attempting to claim ownership of my property. 3 weeks passed with no further communication. Then local news ran a story about HOA overreach, featuring anonymous interviews with several residents from the development who were unhappy with the board's handling of various issues, including wasting resources fighting a losing battle over a private lake that was never part of the community. The next HOA meeting must have been contentious, because the following day I received an official letter from a new attorney representing the HOA. This one had a completely different tone, acknowledging my property rights and apologizing for any misunderstanding. They requested a meeting to discuss potential future collaboration. I agreed to meet them at my attorney's office. The HOA was now represented by 3 new board members. The previous president and several others had been voted out in an emergency election. They offered a formal apology and proposed a legitimate arrangement. They would pay an annual fee for limited, scheduled access to certain areas of the shoreline for community fishing days. They would also cover additional insurance and contribute to lake maintenance. After careful consideration, I agreed to a modified version of their proposal with strict conditions. I would maintain complete control, scheduled access would be limited to specific days, and I could revoke the arrangement at any time if the terms were violated. Most importantly, only residents who registered individually and signed liability waivers would be permitted, and anyone caught trespassing outside of approved times would result in the entire agreement being revoked. Interestingly, as we finalized the details, I learned that the former HOA president had actually been telling prospective homebuyers about lake access to inflate property values, which explained their aggressive stance. They'd been promising something they didn't own. Today, 1 year later, things have settled into a reasonable routine. The HOA pays me a substantial annual fee for 8 scheduled community lake days per year, which I personally supervise. They also contributed to a beautiful boathouse I built last fall. I've given individual access codes to the few neighbors who had always been respectful from the beginning. The older gentleman still comes to fish twice a week, and we often share coffee on my dock. As for the former HOA president and his allies, they've made several requests for personal access codes. I've politely but firmly declined each time. Just last weekend, I spotted him standing outside the fence, watching families enjoying a scheduled fishing day on my terms. The irony isn't lost on me. Had they simply asked permission respectfully from the beginning, instead of trying to take what wasn't theirs, I probably would have been much more generous with access. Instead, they taught me a valuable lesson about standing firm on property rights and forced me to create the secure paradise I now enjoy. My grandfather would be proud. He always said, "Good fences make good neighbors." I never understood how right he was until now. The next one is a malicious compliances story. I was a manager of a programming department. I initially had 5 programmers reporting to me, and I was able to spend half of my time programming and half managing. I had always gotten exceeds or far exceeds expectations on my annual reviews. About 10 years later, my team had 25 people, and I was spending less and less time programming. Fast forward a few years, and I missed 2 months during the year for a surgery and hospital stay, and in my annual review, my boss, who knew nothing about programming, told me I was not doing a good job, and the programming department was missing deliverable dates. Probably because I was in the hospital. They wanted me to go back to just programming, and I was stripped of my manager and only focus on programming. I was pissed off, but I told him that I can do that. I told my former staff what had happened and told them to direct all questions to my boss, who knew zero about programming. He was overwhelmed, and soon senior management figured out that my boss was the problem, not me. They canned him and replaced him with the VP of programming in the UK. I am in the US. She was great since she started as a programmer and was an excellent boss in general. Since I was just a programmer now, all of the managers were in the UK, and I told my former staff to direct all questions to their new bosses in the UK. Since there was 6-hour time difference, and we only overlapped 2 or 3 hours each day, that made getting questions answered in a timely fashion quite difficult. In the meantime, my health wasn't the best, and my doctor told me I should go to a 4-day, 32-hour work week so my health wouldn't continue to suffer. Since my employer was a strict 40-hour week company, I looked for another job and got 8 job offers in about a month. I was ready to resign. Finally, after a few months, my new boss asked me to be a manager again because of the time difference between US and UK, and because I most experience as a programmer in the company. Instead, I gave her my resignation and explained why. She asked me what it would get me to stay, and I told I wanted a 10% raise and wanted to work 4-day, 32-hour work. I gave her 24 hours to respond. She spoke to higher-ups and finally came back the next day and agreed. The next one is a pro-revenge story. This is the story of Mike. Mike managed the warehouse of a hospital. Said hospital was built in the 50s in the center of the town. The stadium is on one side, the Justice Hall on another, and schools on a third side. There is also a caserne and 2 other medical buildings around, so the streets are crowded with cars searching for a parking. One day, when opening the gate of the landing dock, Mike noticed a little car parked in the hospital internal court near the 2000L liquid oxygen tank. That model of tank. Of course, it is absolutely forbidden because, 1. This is a private property, 2. The court has been planned before 35T truck was the norm and maneuvering is already difficult. And 3. Liquid oxygen is explosive. A car or a truck hitting the tank would be a major hazard. It was a small Italian car. No advertisement. But it was the kind commonly used as second car or to travel in the Dolomite Mountains where the roads are very narrow, so Mike makes some calls. The car is not owned by someone of the warehouse or the nursing staff. No doctor have such a small car. The reception made public announcements asking visitors to move the badly parked car, to no avail. By 18H, the car is gone. Okay, problem solved. The day after, the car is there yet. Same calls with same result. Mike called the police, but the police cannot make it towed because it is a private place, and Towering Company won't do it without a police query. By chance, that day only lorries came to unload medical materials. When it is time to close the warehouse, the car is gone once more. On the third day, when the landing dock opened, the car is already there, and now, that is a real problem. A 35T truck from Germany must come this day. There is no way it can reach the dock without tilting the car and the liquid oxygen tank. It has become a clear and present problem of security. All the warehouse team exchanged ideas on what to do, but all feasible solutions have already been tried. It is when someone from maintenance team passed on a forklift with a pallet of plaster bags. It struck everybody at the same time. There is no way the Italian car could weigh more than 1 ton of plaster. So Mike goes see the forklift driver while the team search for a wood pallet. Slowly, with many precautions, the forklift slided the pallet under the car, lift the hole, and went drop the car off the nearby street. In the first 10 minutes, the police is warned that a car is parked in the middle of the street, blocking the traffic. The said car is towed away in less than a half hour. The truck had no problem maneuvering. 2 days later, rumors ran the hospital. It was the car of the director's wife. She worked in a medical building some streets away. While everybody found that Mike made a good move, they wait to see what will follow. It is now a global problem of management. Mike is called to the direction. As soon as he passed the door, he started to explain, "Yes, I know it is your wife's car, but..." The director went, "What? No, I called you for an entirely other matter. I warned my wife several times. She had it coming, that C*net. Until the hospital closed 20 years after, the story has been repeated to each new worker and each medical student. Put your car on a tree if you want, but don't park in the landing dock court because Mike will make it disappear." The next one is an entitled people story. I was the electronics department manager for a now defunct big box toy store 15 plus years ago. Normally, my interactions with customers were never more than a few minutes. This particular day, I was helping a customer that wanted information about several video game consoles and game recommendations. My store manager paged me through the headsets we wore. I informed her I was with someone and would follow up with her when I was free. I did hear some commotion in the background, but thought nothing of it since it can get loud in the store. She paged me again a few minutes later. I repeated my situation. She informed me that she needed me to come to the return counter. I let her know that I would be there when I was finished with the customer. She paged 4 or 5 times over the next 10 minutes. I heard a woman almost yelling at her each time I was paged. I couldn't make out what was being said, but whoever it was didn't sound happy. I'm finally available after the 10 minutes and let my manager know that I'm on my way. I don't receive a response. I arrived at the return counter a few seconds later. It's calm and quiet. I ask my manager what she wants. She tells me she took care of the customer and everything is good. I asked again because it must have been important. My manager informed me that a customer wanted to exchange her Nintendo 64 because we gave her a bad console. My N64 inventory hadn't changed in the past couple of weeks. I knew that something was off. One thing my manager didn't know was that I had done warranty work for Nintendo prior to relocating and working there. I knew, and still know, the warranty verification phone number by heart. I called the number, entered the serial number, and listened. I was not surprised with what I heard. I replayed the verification and placed the phone on speaker. The message played the console was no longer eligible for return or repairs. The warranty expired 2 years prior, and to contact the store, it was purchased from Walmart. My manager just stared at me. I told her there's nothing I can do with it. She eventually said the customer was extremely upset and wanted to make her happy. I hope that lady enjoyed her brand new N64. And in my opinion, my manager wasn't very bright and didn't learn from her experience. I left for greener pastures a couple months later. The next one is an entitled parent story. It's been a while since I posted, but I'm back with a good one. As a reminder, I'm a lifeguard at a water park and I deal with Karens a lot, but recently I was actually promoted to head guard, aka manager, which is a whole new ballpark. This is something that happened today. I worked a 14.5-hour shift, so I saw a lot, but nothing pissed me off more than this. So, down to the story. I started the day with the basic head guard stuff, starting the water up, writing the guard rotation, etc. We opened at 9 like we usually do, and it was good until about 10:12 specifically. A family came in. A mom, dad, young daughter, and 3 teenage boys, all about 17, 18. Immediately, the boys were trouble for my guards. I got at least 10 complaints about them, but they were staggered. They were going from one half to a different half every time they'd get in trouble because there's no communication between halves. Regardless, it reached its tipping point at 4 o'clock, just into the second shift. I also need to add, I am infamous among the staff for the way I deal with Karens, entitled kids, and rude guests. I have zero tolerance. Anyway, back to the story. I heard a long, loud double whistle while checking the cameras in the first aid room. That means one of 3 things: accident, injury, or attention. I headed over to see a fuming mother screaming at one of my guards. In fact, one of my friends from when I was a normal guard, so I was immediately on edge with this one. I came up and asked her, "Can I help with something?" EM for entitled mom, me for, well, me. EM: "Yes, this bitch, me. Let's watch the language." Exasperated sigh. EM: "This guard banned my son and his friends from this slide for no reason." I looked over. It was them. The thorns in my side. Me: "Ah, I see." Guard name: "Watch your water, I can handle this." I turned back to the mom. Me: "Ma'am, I'm going to be honest with you. Your son and his friends aren't banned from the slide." EM: "So then why?" I raised a hand to continue. Me: They're banned from the park. She exploded. Why this? Why that? You asshole, blah blah the works. Eventually she calmed down and said, why? They haven't done anything wrong. Me, actually they've broken nearly every rule we have and have been causing problems all day. EM, what have they really done? What could they have possibly... They've endangered themselves, other guests, and my lifeguards with their reckless behavior. EM, frankly enraged. How have they endangered people? Me started to get worked up. They've gone down every slide the wrong way, jumped out halfway down, nearly hit people while playing dodgeball with the basketballs, which is against the rules anyway, and I have guards posted at the bottom of every slide. Them coming out incorrectly endangers my guards. They easily could have given themselves and nearly everyone around them concussions or at worst broken bones. They need to leave. EM. Well, we paid for a room for 2 nights. Me, increasingly angry. And that isn't a problem. You, your husband, and your daughter can all stay and enjoy the park. The boys, however, have to leave. They can either be taken home by one of you, or they can stay in their room for the rest of the night. EM, flabbergasted and trying to regain control. But what app? Me, done with her shit, ma'am. I don't know what gave you the impression this was a debate. You are in no position to argue. You are in a position to comply. So if they don't leave in the next 10 minutes, they will be removed. She stood there for a moment in shock, then got uppity and went to the hot tub. I decided she didn't get the 10 if she wasn't going to use them. I took my walkie out and said, head guard to security desk, code yellow. That's the code for guest removal. They came in, we found the kids, took them to their parents, and then escorted them to their rooms while they were still drying themselves off. I may have been a bit of a dick, not gonna lie, but she was being combative, and I had other more important things to do. Because of her, I was late on my chems check, checking chlorine levels in the water, flow state, etc., so I was done with the entire situation. On top of that, she called my friend and employee a bitch, so that doesn't slide. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.